Hello YouTube and welcome back to another Dare to Game video. Today we're playing Solace Crafting and we're doing another video on it. And so today it's going to be the 5 most serious improvements that I think it needs right now. And so obviously this is a indie game, it's small, it's developing. I'm sure that a lot of this stuff maybe is already planned to be worked on or will be soon. But over the course of my several dozen hours that I've played into it so far, I've enjoyed most everything, but there's a couple things that could really use an improvement. And so I'm just going to go through the 5 ones that I kind of highlighted in my notes while I was playing along. And so the first one is going to be just the overall user interface for basically moving stuff around. If you see resources here and everything, if you go into a chest, you can like select empty and bring everything into your inventory, or fill and put everything back into the inventory. But it doesn't allow you to control very well. You can't just hit one stacking like shift click or control click it like most games like this have. And by splitting, you have to split here, and it's not nearly as intuitive as most games of this style are. And my problem with the old fill and empty, it only exists on some storage things. It doesn't, it's not universal in any way. There are lots of different types of things, like if you want to use the transmogrifier, it's just not an option there. You have to sit there and click and drag and click and drag. And if you're doing a lot of resource compacting, that's very time consuming. And so given the amount of time that I put into the game, doing it in here, or smithing anything in the forge, or cutting your wood, or cooking things, it's all manual click and drag, baby. It takes all day long, and it's real annoying. So that's one thing that just, I don't know how easy or how hard it would be to do that, but you know the games I'm thinking of, games like Valheim, or Minecraft, or 7 Days to Die, or anything like that, where right from your inventory, if you've got 2 inventories open and you want to move it from one to the other, you shift click, and you can immediately just move them into that inventory. It allows you to target it much better than a generalized empty or fill button. I do like having the option in storage to, if I was to press fill in storage, it wouldn't just throw everything from my inventory in, just adds it to the existing stacks in the inventory. If you're going to do fill and empty in a game like this, it should be like that. That way I don't need to worry about, you know, the resources I don't want going into that specific chest going in there. So that's number 1, and it's a pretty serious one for me because it grinds my gameplay to a halt every time I want to process something. Number 2 is actually related to the different tiers of materials. And so in this game, basically this number 2 is a 2-parter. So the first option would be to try to make the game seem less pointless over time, is either A, give us the ability to convert tier materials to different tiers. So we have the transmogrifier here, which allows us to transfer or change, I should say, like common into uncommon, uncommon into rare, rare into elite, elite into legendary. So we do that here. You don't have to go out and collect elite stone. You can just collect a ton of common stone and change it into elite stone. That should be the same. There should be a similar device for doing the same thing with tier materials. So that way, if you spend a long time gathering up tier 0 materials and you've just got a whole bunch of them, and then you move on, those materials aren't totally useless. Because probably by that time, like if you're in tier 5 already, those tier 0 materials are useless for trying to skill up your character at all. So basically, you're just going to, throw them away? It goes against the grain of a hoarding game like this. Either, if you're going to have so many different tiers of materials that are not unique from each other in any way other than the artificial tier level that you've given them to make the game do something, then there should be a conversion system where you can change lower tier materials into higher tier materials. That's one option for fixing this problem. The other option, which I think is much, much better, is actually to limit the tiers in the game and just make them unique. That way, A, it doesn't feel artificial and pointless. It's not like, oh, tier 0 iron and tier 1 iron, they look exactly the same, they weigh the same thing, they make weapons that look identical, they're even called iron, they're just different because of the tier. That's an annoying system, especially when it's limitless. So I haven't found an end to these tiers. I found an end in a lot of the upgrades. Most of them end somewhere in the 15 to 20 range before they, the higher tiers don't mean anything, they don't do anything differently. But I haven't found an end in the actual materials. And so it seems like a bad game design just to me. So I don't mind the expanding difficulty. I like that. It helps drive you further out into the world, and it gives a game that normally probably wouldn't encourage as much exploration. It gives you a reason to push out further. And so I don't have a problem with the tier system, but I have a problem with them not being unique from each other. One thing, just from a random glance, if they were unique, it wouldn't be as easy to confuse them. And for another, like I said, organically just following rules in the game, it would make sense that if you were trying to build, let's say your first metal instead of being iron right away was copper or something, and then tin and iron, and maybe you could make an alloy like steel or something like that, or they could make up metals or use mythical metals like mithril and adamantium and stuff like that. If you wanted to do it that way, you can't make an adamantium steel with iron, so that way it makes sense to have separate tiers. You know, it's not tier 1 iron, which looks identical to tier 7 iron, so why can't you use it? They're both iron. Like I said, it feels more organic that you have to actually go out and get adamantium to make your armor than just some in-game rule saying you can't use this iron because for some reason it's not as good as that iron. When they're the same material, that's a problem. And it'd be easier with stone things, so the stone follows the same tier system. If you started with sandstone and then went to limestone and then granite and then quartz and, you know, went through them like that, or followed whatever type of stones you like, since it is a fantasy game, I feel like you could do all sorts of things. I just think that system would work way better. And I also wouldn't have the tiers go nearly as high. I would probably design the game to be like 20 tiers and have it spread out like that. Maybe have the zones where the tiers happen be larger zones or something. But I would not have infinite zones. Nobody's going to play this game long enough to get to tier 1000. That would be long past the average longevity of a game like this. So I would make the zones more structured, more meaningful, and more unique. I think in that way you do encourage more longevity. Because as it is, like I said, I do like to explore outwards, but I already can tell that from the amount of how I'm annoyed by like the line between tiers and gathering materials and needing these, you know, this many tier 2 rocks to upgrade this thing, and I can't use any of the previous tiers even though I've got a whole chest full of them. I can tell that that's going to be an annoyance for me if it doesn't change in some meaningful way. So yeah, that's number 2. Number 3 is quite simple. Mounts or wagons. So this game, there's 2 ways, or I should say 3 ways to move around the map. The first way is by walking. Walking/running, and there are skills you can upgrade to make you run faster, and that's very nice. And even the movement speed, considering there's not a stamina drain, it works pretty well, and I do like it. Then the other 2 ways to get around the map are both teleportation. You have the keyline teleporter system, which you can set one up and you can pick a direction and travel 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, 25, 50, 100. It goes all the way up to 1,000 kilometers once you've upgraded it high enough. That's a pretty cool and unique system, and it's pretty well set. So what you can do is what I did and set up a keyline teleportation system. So I just set this one up as my center one, and then I went 5 kilometers out in each direction, set up another one, and did that every 5 kilometers. So I can somewhat dial in exactly where I want to go in 5 kilometer increments. The other way to move around that currently exists is the Solace teleportation system. And so you can click on any one of your other Solaces that you've made anywhere else in the world and teleport to them. So you can move around the map pretty easily. The problem is the Solace system is set, so you have to have been to that place already and set up a Solace if you want to teleport there. Otherwise, you just go to the nearest one and run. And the keyline system only goes in 5 kilometer increments, which is a pretty large increment, not to mention, considering it's not like you can pick a spot about 5 kilometers away and then use the teleporter. It's exactly north, south, east, or west. And at least half of the time so far that I've used it, it's dropped me in the middle of the water, which is super annoying. So I would like a mount or a vehicle, like a wagon or something like that system, to get around faster than running and possibly carry more stuff, but not be as random or unpredictable as the teleportation system is. And so when you want to go resource hunting, for example, if I want to go down here and get this rare rock, that is a really long run. Yeah, I could go down there and set up a Solace, and then the next time I wanted to get to that point, I could teleport right there, but that rock's probably not going to be there again. The Solace system's not very useful there, and the keyline teleporter won't put me very close to there, might drop me in the middle of the water. It's hard to say. Might shoot me across. It's just not as customizable as it could be. So a horse that could get me there in half the time of running, or maybe even faster than that, would be super useful, and again, I think would just help encourage more organic exploration of the world. Number 4 is simple. Some sort of a story, another intrigue or something to pull you outward, again, to force you to go further, especially if they have no plans to limit the tiers or kind of make it more defined, which I think would organically pull people outwards. Then some sort of inorganic means is going to be necessary to keep people adventuring. And if you take example, a game like No Man's Sky, which was similar to this, it was a resource gathering, hoarding game where basically the point was to keep traveling further and further. This game's really similar to that if you think about it at at that scale. A game like that, eventually you just kind of get sick of it. And so early on, now they've got quite a bit more story, and it's actually quite a bit more fun to play because they developed it enough. But back then, the loose story was what? Reach the center of the universe? There was something, though. This game, at least as far as I am now, mind you, I haven't been playing in the journal. Maybe there is a great story. For me, it seemed to just be tutorial type stuff, which is great for people who have never played a video game before. But for me, it just wasn't enough to keep me wanting to follow their exact path. So I haven't. And if there's a story buried in there, I retract this point, and I see that maybe I should have played more of the tutorial missions. But if my gut feeling is right, those are just basic tutorial missions, and they don't have some sort of a overarching plot where I have to go rescue someone or discover some hidden city or gain a companion or whatever it may be, you know? There's nothing there. And a story that will pull you outwards, make you explore more and more, maybe take you to some really dangerous place, so that's why you have to level up and get the best gear in the world, because there's going to be this ultimate terrible boss that you have to fight, and so you have to be way stronger than the average explorer would be, then something like that is what this game needs. Like I said, there's two ways to keep people playing and draw them out. One is the organic way of having a defined system where there is an end and it's in sight and it has tangible goals that are different from the ones here. Or B, have a story that makes us want to get there regardless of how the world's structured. So that's number 4, just some sort of story or a plot line or something like that, something intriguing to make you want to keep playing. And number 5 is one that is probably the most important for an indie game like this, and it's just better optimization. So this comes in a manner of ways. Obviously, the movement alone, I've seen some complaints on my other YouTube videos already about how the movement in this game is a bit jarring. It's kind of floaty. The leg movement looks weird, not like an actual person running, but someone kind of gliding on a treadmill. But other than just basic movement type stuff, combat is not super smooth. I've gotten used to it, so it doesn't jar me as much as it did when I first started playing, but it's still something that you can tell needs some work. For one thing, oftentimes it'll be hard to actually make contact with people, especially if there's some sort of an elevation difference. Attacks, even though the weapon is long enough that it obviously would have reached them, they'll still for some reason miss, or just it won't register on the hitbox that you're aiming for. But if nothing else, the attacks do feel kind of mostly floaty and weightless. So combat overall obviously could use some tinkering over time to make it feel a little bit more meaningful. And I think if you did that, obviously you'd, again, compel more people to play the game, just because getting good at a combat system that's gratifying in some way is reason enough for people to play a game. Just look at the Dark Souls series for an example of that. Other than that, and the better movement animations that we've already talked about, one of the biggest things I've noticed, and I'll show you it here, optimization-wise, is there's some extreme stuttering when you use the keyline teleportation system. So basically, if you do what I've done here and you have multiple portals set up so you can actually kind of dial in your accuracy, the world gets real stuttery. So if I go 10 kilometers east and then I follow this one and I go just 5 kilometers east, you know, so I can go 15 instead of having to skip up to 25, A, it drops me in the water, which like I said, and B, when it doesn't, so when it drops you in the water, it slows you down enough that the world doesn't stutter nearly as much. But when it doesn't do that and you're on land and you try running around, the game just stutters like it's fallen apart. Like you've installed 1,000 mods on Skyrim and you're level 200 and you've been dropping all of your loot all over the place. So it's just overloaded with assets. That's kind of what it feels like. And I'm sure this has to do with the cell-based procedural generation that this game clearly uses. You can tell that there's a radius around your character where things exist, and outside of that radius, things don't exist. And so the optimization on the rendering and the pop-in on that definitely needs work. So I'm sure, again, as this is an indie game and it's an active development, I'm 100% positive that this complaint will be addressed naturally, just because obviously indie games do release in a rough state and they need to be smoothed out as they go. So this one is probably one that doesn't need to be said, but I felt like saying it anyway just because the stuttering was getting to me last night. So other than that, just for overall optimization, the game just to be polished more and more. It's obviously, like I said, a small indie game, and so I'm sure that's already the plan, but I feel like it still was it's a thing that needs to be considered, because there are certain games out there that get to the point of release like this and then the dev just stops because they're like, well, it's released, people can buy it now. It's an indie game. I don't have any responsibility to polish it. People need to not expect a AAA game. That's the wrong attitude to have. And I'm not saying this dev has that attitude. I'm just saying ongoing development towards optimizing the game to have it be as good as it can be is obviously what we want. So that's all 5 of the serious or somewhat serious improvements that I think this game could really use in its current state. If you have any suggestions or disagree with anything I said, obviously leave that down in the comment section below. But in any case, that's all for today, so we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching another Dare to Game video. If you like this video, please leave a like and a comment. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you like my content and would like to support this channel, consider becoming a member today for as little as $1.99 a month. It makes a huge difference. But in any case, thanks for watching and have a nice day. I'll see you next time.